DeWitt, you take this one away first. Your first game that already is catching your eye for week 2.
I'll take the Dolphins plus 3.5 against the Bills in Miami. First thing I look at when I look at the spreads is, are there any home dogs that catch my eye immediately? Yesterday was a big day for underdogs across the NFL. The books had a great day because underdogs and unders were winning across the board. For me, that's Miami is one that sticks out right away. And the reason they stick out is because they have the defense similar to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had a great defensive day yesterday against Mac Jones and the Patriots. Tua had an okay game. I watched a lot of the game, but I wouldn't say Tua was impressive. The same way that, I'd say Burrow had a great game yesterday. He really controlled the situation, looked great in the pocket, made some great throws. I wouldn't say Tua had that same game when I'm looking at the second-year quarterbacks, but I think he managed the game and allowed the team to get the win. Same kind of situation here. The Steelers really frustrated Josh Allen and the entire Bills offense yesterday. And to me, that's just shocking because at points yesterday in the same, you're looking at the Chiefs-Browns game, the Browns frustrated Mahomes at points in that game, but then he came through and got the win, at least got his offense on track and figured it out and have ways to win. But Allen and the Bills offense just never got going yesterday. There was just nothing that they could figure out. And it just seems like they're a little bit lost right now. And I think the Dolphins defense is going to provide the same kind of frustration that the Steelers defense did. Will the Bills have as bad of a game as they did against the Steelers? No way. But I just think the Dolphins can cover 3.5 points at home this week against, a divisional rival again. And if the Dolphins can go 2-0 in that division to start, they're going to be right on track to make the playoffs and be a team that we're talking about all year as one of the top teams in the AFC.
A woefully inefficient game for that Buffalo offense, and that is something we just do not expect, even against a great defense in Pittsburgh. That is very arguably the best front seven in the NFL that the Bills went up against in week 1. So no shame in being slowed down by the Steelers, certainly, but I was surprised to see the Bills offense be as inefficient as it was. And this is something Jake Seeley brought up on our Monday fantasy show. Zach Moss is an important piece of that offense because he keeps defenses honest. When he's not in there, there was no run threat. And you saw that in the fact that Devin Singletary had 11 carries for 72 yards. And it was sort of like a so what? The Steelers did not mind if they got gashed here and there by Devin Singletary so long as they were limiting big plays in the passing game. And they did that very, very well. Josh Allen, 5.3 yards per attempt in that game. So maybe that's a blueprint that the Dolphins try to follow. I'm not sure if they can follow it as well as Pittsburgh did, but it's something that I wouldn't be surprised to see from Brian Flores' group next week. It's a stay away for me right now. I'll see how things transpire over the week, and maybe I'll get in on one side or the other, but not one that jumped out at me personally this week. One that did, DeWitt, is the Thursday night game. I'm actually picking at either end of the schedule. I'm going Thursday night and Sunday night. The Thursday night game this week is Washington and the Giants. Washington 4.5-point favorites at home. That's very light. That just feels very, very light to me, DeWitt, after what we saw from this Giants offense this past week. That line is a mess. We knew it was going to be a mess, and it proved to be a mess in that game against the Broncos in week 1. And Washington can bring that same sort of pass rush to bear, maybe even a stronger one than the Broncos did, given that Bradley Chubb wasn't out there for Denver. I think that the Giants offensive line once again is going to have major protection issues up front. Daniel Jones did not play well. The score of 27-13 does not illustrate just how much Denver controlled that game from start to finish. You had a garbage time touchdown from the Giants at the very end of the game. You had KJ Hamler drop a touchdown pass earlier in the game. That one very easily could have been more like 30-7 than 27-13. So I think that we see something similar from Washington. I guess if I was going to be concerned about one thing, it's the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick is out, going to be missing a couple of weeks with a hip injury. Taylor Heineke takes over. And so why I'm not as concerned about that as I typically would be, especially for a short week game, is that Taylor Heineke's been there. Taylor Heineke knows the team. Taylor Heineke knows the offense. Taylor Heineke knows the players around him who he's playing with. He's not a typical short week backup quarterback, I don't think. And you like the short week when you're playing at home. Washington played at home in week 1. They're playing at home in week 2, so they haven't had to go anywhere yet this season. The Giants, meanwhile, do have to make that trip and do so after just getting the doors blown off them by the Broncos. So I really, really like Washington in this one. Jumped out at me right away when I saw it.
The only thing that concerns me, another injury that popped up for Washington was Antonio Gibson. Looked like he may have suffered a shoulder injury. That's just something to keep an eye on as the week goes on. Running backs can play through shoulder injuries. It's really not an issue as like a lower body injury. Concerns me a lot more with the running back, but he's just so key to that offense. as kind of like their 3-down threat. He played a lot on 3rd down yesterday. I know we had talked about preseason, like J.D. McKissick, getting a lot of that 3rd down action, but Gibson was in there a decent amount on 3rd down and catching passes. So that's just something to keep an eye on as we go. But I agree with you here, as like Washington, even giving up the points is a decent amount on a Thursday night. Is there seems like the Giants may be one of the worst teams, like we talked about in the preseason in the NFL. And unless something like what's going to change between Sunday and Thursday on a short week, the Jaguars were really bad. They might be able to turn it around a little bit this week, but I just don't see the Giants solving things in like a 2-day, 3-day window that they have before they have to travel.
Yeah, neither do I. Maybe Saquon gets a couple of days healthier and they're ready to work him into the offensive game plan a little bit more than they did in week 1. But I think you could just as easily, we're not doctors, so you could just as easily make the other argument of, maybe they take it easy on him in week 2, get him a full 2 weeks, and then really start to turn it on for Saquon in week 3. Good point on Antonio Gibson. Going to keep an eye on that injury. 20 carries for 90 yards, 3 catches on 5 targets for 18 yards in week 1 against the Chargers. So he's definitely a key piece of that offense.